celebrating 30 years of phenomenal trend forecasting. Here's Gerald Salenti with today's trends in the news.
Hi, this is Gerald Salenti. It's Friday, January 17th, 2020, and here are some of today's trends in the news. On the market front, it's an up day everywhere, from Asia to Europe to USA. You have to have that Chinese trade deal, and everybody's really up about it. We don't think it's going to do much in the future, but we'll see, and we're staying with our forecast. It's not going to do a lot to increase trade. So, Bitcoin keeps bouncing high. It's near that $9,000 a coin mark. And gold's up. Gold is up over $56 an ounce. So it's up above that 1,550 mark, 1,556. So it's looking good. Oil's down. So, stocks rose slightly on Friday as Wall Street wrapped up a solid weekly performance that featured record levels amid strong global economic data. You know what that is.
Bullshit.
You got it. Friday's gains came after Chinese industrial data for December topped expectations overnight, with production rising 6.9% on a year-over-year basis. The overall Chinese economy grew 6.1%, and that's the slowest since 1990. It's above the 6% it grew. But even though 6.1% is weak, considering that the United States economy is only going to grow about 2.2%, that's still solid growth. And China can't keep up the growth that they've had over the last 20 years. There's no way of doing it. And the earnings season's starting off pretty well, but also what pushed the markets up in the States was that U.S. housing starts soared nearly 17% in December. That's right, up 16.9%. And that's the highest level since December 2006. Housing starts soared 40.8% on a year-on-year basis. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate has dropped to an average of 3.65% from 4.94% in November 2018. So let's put this into perspective. Go back to November 2018. They were raising interest rates, and they're going to raise them again in 2019. And then in 2019, in January, Fed Chair Powell said, well, we're going to be a little hesitant on that. So they didn't raise interest rates at all this year. They brought them back 3 times. So what does that mean? It means back in 2018, I said you're going to see interest rates below 4% in 2019. I said that in 2018. And now, this year, you're going to see record low interest rates. As they lower interest rates in the Fed, I believe that by November this year, they'll be down to 0 to negative rates. So, what else do we have? Oil. Oil posts second straight week of declines as global demand concerns weigh on prices. Wait a minute. This says strong global economic data. Well, I guess they got confused over there at CNBC. Oil prices steadied on Friday as sluggish economic growth in China, the world's biggest crude importer, raised concerns over fuel demand and countered optimism from the signing of the U.S.-China trade deal. Is a global slowdown. Take a look at the numbers. Here's some of them. You ready? German GDP growth slides to 6-year low. Hey, but wait a minute. They said we're strong economic growth. You know what kind of growth they're looking at over there? 0.6% for 2019. Turkey cuts benchmark rate again in bid to boost growth. Wait a minute. They said growth was going great. So what did they do? Turkey cut its benchmark interest rate for the 5th consecutive time. in efforts to encourage more lending. So because inflation is going up, where their interest rates are now, they're basically zero when compared with inflation. Oh, central bank makes surprise rate cut. South African Reserve Bank cut interest rates to 6.25%. A surprise move, spurred by lower than expected inflation expectations. You know what that is.
Bullshit.
You got it. The economy's slowing down, and they're trying to boost it up. Argentina inflation rise adds to pressure on Fernandez. Argentina's inflation rate hit 53.8%. Could you imagine? 53.8%. And again, he inherited what Macron, Ginsburg, Iceberg, what's the difference? Left him when they took out that big loan from the IMF, the biggest loan in IMF history. They got real problems over there. They're only going to get worse. So, looking back in the States, apartment developers court the wealthy. Builders are on track to finish more new apartments in 2020 than in any year since the 1980s. And some 80% of what they're building is for the luxury market. And you keep looking around, and it's the same deal all around the world. That's why you're seeing these strikes going on, because the luxury markets are getting it and everybody else is getting it. So, in that strong economy, industrial production in the U.S. fell 0.3%. The fourth quarter as a whole, industrial production was down 0.5%. Production was down in 3 of the 4 quarters of 2019. Output was down 1% on a year-to-year basis. Automobiles, that's a big one. The gain in December came despite a 4.6% drop for output of motor vehicles and parts. I bring that up because I've been saying there's an auto slowdown around the world, and that's a big number to look at, because other than housing, this is what comes in second. And as far as housing, as I said, the numbers are going up. But again, that's because of cheap interest rates, and people need a place to live. And you could drive a car, but you can't live in a house. Or no, it's the other way around. You can live in a car, but you can't drive a house. Gold will soar to record highs on easing policy, says world's biggest hedge fund. Greg Jensen, co-chief investment officer of Bridgewater Associates, the world's biggest hedge fund, said gold could surge to a record high above $2,000 an ounce as central banks embrace higher inflation and political uncertainties increase. Political uncertainties around the world. Remember, it's the New World Disorder. The people are protesting. The central banks are going to do everything they can to lower interest rates. You read this article in the Financial Times, and Bridgewater is saying virtually word for word what I have been saying now for 2 years. And this is the world's biggest hedge fund. $2,000 an ounce. And why is gold going up? Why are the commodity prices going up? Because they're looking for more lower interest rates and dollar forecast to fall and lift commodities. That's the big key here. The dollar is going to go lower, interest rates around the world are going lower, and gold prices are going to go higher. What else do we have here? In October, the Fed began buying $60 billion in Treasury bills per month. So expect the market's straight-up trajectory is muddying efforts to distinguish the new program from the old one. The S&P 500 has soared 16% since its low in August, including the best fourth quarter rally in 6 years. since the Fed started buying T-bills. So there you go, in the repo markets. That's what's pushing these equity markets up more than anything. There's a global slowdown, the markets are overvalued, and as long as the money junkies keep getting their monetary methadone, the markets are going to keep going up. It's as simple as that. China renews its Belt and Road push for global influence. Chinese companies signed Belt and Road contracts worth nearly $128 billion in the first 11 months of last year. The business of China is business. The business of America's war. And that's the fact. And what else do we have here? On a global front, Iraq's leader leaves decision on U.S. troops to successor. Iraq's caretaker prime minister indicated he would leave the decision whether to expel U.S. forces from the country to his successor, potentially sowing problems that could trigger an American military aid cuts and sanctions. Isn't that something? They tell the United States to get the hell out of their country, that the United States illegally invaded, and we're going to put sanctions on you, and we're going to do other things to you. How about letting the people of Iraq decide whether or not they want a foreign occupier in there? I don't know. That wouldn't be allowed. Militia chief's death raises sea of blood fears. This is talking about the Iraqi Shia militia person that was killed. But I want to read this part because they refer to Soleimani in this Financial Times article and talking about him as well as the commander of the Iraqi militia. They said that he was killed in the same U.S. airstrike, meaning the Iraqi, that eliminated the Iranian spy master. Now he's a spy master. This is the propaganda that they put out. And they wanted to get rid of that Iraqi guy. You know why they said over here? Because he was a thorn in Washington's side. Could you imagine a thorn in Washington's side who's illegally occupying a foreign nation? But that's the language. Other geopolitical news. The strikes keep going in France. Yesterday, over 500,000 French strikers and youth marched for the 43rd day of strikes against President Macron, the Garçons' pension cuts. Look how the people over there fight. In the United States, all they want to do is fight for more war. Hardly any protests going on about President Trump's assassination, an illegal assassination by international laws of the Iranian general. Matter of fact, some 47% of Americans approved of it. But the people there are fighting for their rights. Le Figaro found that 66% of the population still considers the strike justified. And going back to the Afghan war, that's out of the news. Those Afghanistan papers came out. Oh, and they've been having some hearings over there in Congress, but the impeachment news is the big news. Afghan war plagued by, quote, mendacity of lies. Inspector General tells Congress. The Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction told Congress on Wednesday that U.S. officials have routinely lied to the public during the 18-year war by exaggerating progress reports and inflating statistics to create false appearance of success. America, the land of the free, the land of the freaks, run by the freaks. Outright lies, stealing our money. Do you know that they stole more of our money to rebuild Afghanistan, to give to the military-industrial complex, than, when adjusted for inflation, than the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe after World War II? Quote, when we talk about mendacity, when we talk about lying, it's not just lying about particular programs, it's lying by omissions. this gentleman said, it turns out that everything that is bad news has been classified for the last few years. So they keep the bad news out. That's classified. We can't tell you. And this is John Sobko. And he's testimony before the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Washington continues war buildup against Iran. There's a story here about all the troops, all the fighter jets, all the on and on that the United States is bringing to the region and doing drills and making plans to increase the war against Iran. If this war breaks out the way it's being spelled out, it's going to be the beginning of World War III. Peace. How about occupying peace? Here we go. OccupyPeace.com. Put your money where your heart is, because if we don't fight for peace, we're going to die for war. And when war starts, it'll be too late to fight for peace. People will be tying their yellow ribbons around everything that doesn't move and waving their American flags just like they did with the Iraq War and the Afghan War. Canada's media and political establishment endorse illegal assassination of Iranian General Soleimani. This is from the WSWS.org. The language in this that the newspapers are writing in the op-ed pieces is totally disgusting and lies. But the Western countries are supporting it, and now you're seeing France, Germany, the UK, talking about putting sanctions on Iran for not abiding by the nuclear deal that the United States pulled out of, and they're not doing business with Iran, so now they're going to impose even stiffer sanctions. The hypocrisy is right in front of everybody's eyes. And what else do we have here? Bloomberg. Huge spending transforms 2020 campaign. The candidate has spent $217 million so far on television and digital advertising. He's worth an estimated $59 billion. Could you imagine if any of these billionaires gave $217 million to occupy peace, to close the bases overseas, bring home the troops, secure the homeland with them, and put them to work rebuilding our third world infrastructure? The Troops Progress Administration, like the WPA of the 1930s, giving them skills rather than them coming home from fighting these losing wars, the lying wars, and having 22 veterans committing suicide each day. Could you imagine that low-life Bloomberg doing something like that? Of course you can't. This is the little slime ball that had to stop and frisk, and millions of people in New York City stopped by the cops. I don't like the way you look. You're too dark, and you're too Hispanic looking, because that's the most of them that they pulled over and frisked, and then threw in jail if they found a joint on him or anything else. Now, he would never do that. Where are the billionaires? Where's their money? How come they're not speaking out for peace? I'll tell you why. Because they're pieces of crap, most of them. They're Bloombergs. The other articles, the action plan of Occupy Peace, there are 4 of them. I mentioned 2. Close the bases overseas, bring the troops home, secure the homeland, and put them to work. Those are 2. Number 3, force Congress to vote to go to war, which they have not done since World War II, in violation of the Constitution. Article 1, Clause 8. And have on each state ballot a referendum where we the people will decide whether or not to go to war, rather than El Presidente. Could you imagine clowns like Trump, liars like Obama and Bush and Clinton, and the rest leading us to war based on lies, and we don't have a say in this. That's not my country. They're teaching us to hate the Iranians the same way Hitler taught the people to hate the Jews. Look at all the people that believe that Iran is the worst terrorist country in the world. What's the difference? There are three elements. Heil Hitler and follow your leader. Do nothing. Oh, what am I going to do? Or occupy peace any way you can. This is Gerald Salenti, and that's some of today's trends in the news.